The scent of rain-soaked earth mixed with burning sage filled the grand hall, clinging to my skin like a second layer of doubt. I stood at the edge of the gathering, pressed against the cold stone wall, watching the younger women glide across the polished floor in their flowing gowns. Their laughter rang like silver bells, bright and careless, while I clutched my shawl tighter around my shoulders. 32 years old, in this world among our people, that made me practically invisible. The Harvest Moon Gathering happened once every 5 years, a tradition older than memory itself. Every unmated woman of age was expected to attend, to be seen, to be chosen. I had attended 3 of these before. The first time, I'd been 17, hopeful and trembling. The second, 22 and still optimistic. The third, 27 and beginning to understand. Now, at my 4th, I knew exactly what I was, a curiosity at best, a cautionary tale at worst. Emma. My sister's voice cut through my thoughts. Caroline appeared beside me, her face flushed with excitement, her dark hair woven with autumn flowers. At 24, she still had time, still had chances. You're hiding again. I'm observing, I corrected, though we both knew the truth. She squeezed my hand, and I felt the pity in her touch. It made my chest tighten. Someone will see you. You just have to put yourself out there. But I had put myself out there. For 15 years, I had attended every gathering, every festival, every ceremony. I had watched women younger than me find their mates, build their families, take their places in the pack. I had smiled through their joy, while something inside me withered a little more each time. The music shifted, becoming deeper, more primal. The drums spoke of ancient things, of moonblood and wild hunts. Around me, people began to move toward the center of the hall, forming a wide circle. My pulse quickened despite myself. They say he's coming tonight, Caroline whispered, her eyes wide. The Lycan king himself. I had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. King Nathaniel Strand, ruler of the Northern Territories, had been widowed for nearly a decade. His late queen had died in childbirth, along with the child, and he had retreated into himself afterward, becoming something of a legend. They said he was fierce in battle, cold in council, and utterly untouchable in matters of the heart. He was 43 years old, and the entire realm waited to see if he would ever choose another mate. Why would he come here? I asked, genuinely puzzled. Our pack was modest, tucked into the mountains far from the grand cities and political centers. We were farmers, craftspeople, healers. Nothing special. Caroline shrugged, but her excitement was contagious, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Young women preened and adjusted their dresses. Mothers whispered urgently to daughters. Even the pack elders stood straighter, their faces grave with the importance of the moment. I felt suddenly foolish standing there, a woman past her prime, hair going silver at the temples despite the pale blonde that still dominated. My dress was simple, forest green and unadorned, because what was the point of pretending? I had made my peace with my life. I worked in the pack's healing house, tending to the sick and injured. I had my books, my garden, my sister. It was enough. It had to be enough. The massive oak doors at the hall's entrance swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. A hush fell so complete I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. And then he entered. King Nathaniel Strand was not what I expected. The rumors painted him as a monster of a man, all rage and primal power. But the figure who walked through those doors moved with a controlled grace that spoke of a predator absolutely certain of his dominance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvering at the temples. Like mine, I thought absurdly. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, handsome in a way that had nothing to do with softness. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark. Fathomless. Tired. I recognized that exhaustion. It lived in my own mirror, in the moments when I let my guard down. It was the weariness of someone who had survived when they hadn't wanted to, who carried on because stopping wasn't an option. He was flanked by 2 men, his beta and third, I assumed, both formidable in their own right. The beta was a mountain of a man with copper-colored hair, and a scar running down his left cheek. The third was leaner, dark-skinned, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every person in the room within seconds. But my attention stayed fixed on the king as he surveyed the room with those ancient, knowing eyes. Our pack alpha, Dominic, rushed forward to greet him, all deference and nervous energy. Dominic was a good leader, fair and strong, but in the presence of the Lycan king, he seemed diminished somehow, younger than his 40 years. "Your Majesty, we are honored. I'm not here for ceremonies," the king interrupted, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I'm here to observe. Continue as you were." But of course, no one could continue as they were. The entire gathering had transformed into a performance, everyone hyper-aware of the royal presence. Young women danced with exaggerated grace. Conversations became too loud, too bright. It was painful to watch. I stayed where I was, half hidden in the shadows near the wall. This wasn't for me. It never had been, and a visiting king, no matter how lonely his eyes, wouldn't change that fundamental truth. The king moved through the crowd, and I watched the way people parted for him, the way they bowed and simpered. He spoke to a few of the young women, brief exchanges that left them flushed and hopeful. But there was something mechanical about it, something hollow. He was going through motions, fulfilling an obligation. I understood that too. I had spent years going through motions. "Emma, stand up straight," Caroline hissed, suddenly at my elbow again. "He's looking this way." "He's looking at you," I corrected. "And you should go talk to him. You're beautiful and young and Emma." Her voice was sharp. "I'm serious. He keeps glancing over here." I looked up despite myself and my breath caught. The king's gaze had indeed drifted to our corner of the hall, but before I could process what that meant, one of the younger pack members, a girl named Sophie, barely 20, stepped directly into his path, her dress a confection of pink silk and desperate hope. "Your Majesty," she breathed, curtsying so low I was surprised she didn't topple over. "I've heard so much about your bravery. They say you once fought off an entire rival pack single-handedly." The king's expression didn't change. "Rumors tend to exaggerate, but surely some of it must be true," Sophie pressed, her voice taking on a coy quality that made me wince. "A king as powerful as yourself." "Excuse me." He stepped around her with a finality that was almost gentle, but his dismissal was absolute. I watched Sophie's face crumple, watched her retreat back into the crowd, and felt an unexpected kinship with her. We were all just trying to find our place, weren't we? Trying to be seen, to matter, to belong. The king continued his circuit of the room, and I let my attention drift. I found myself studying the intricate carvings on the stone pillars instead, the old protective symbols our ancestors had etched there centuries ago. My mother had taught me to read them when I was young, back when she still believed I would amount to something beyond the pack's eternal spinster. She had died 3 years ago, her disappointment in my unmarried state softened only slightly by her illness. I traced one of the symbols with my eyes, the spiral for continuity, the crescent for protection, the tree for strength. They had always brought me comfort, these ancient markings. They reminded me that I was part of something larger, even if I felt so terribly small. "These markings," a deep voice said beside me, and I startled so badly I nearly dropped my shawl. "They're ancient, protection runes mixed with blessing symbols." The king stood less than 2 feet away, his presence overwhelming in the small space. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading more prominently through his dark hair. He smelled of pine and winter air, of something wild and barely restrained. I swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty. They're meant to guard the pack from harm while invoking prosperity. You can read them?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "My mother was a lore keeper. She believed everyone should know their history." The words came out steadier than I felt. He studied the symbols for a long moment, his hand rising as if to touch them, then dropping back to his side. "Wise woman. Most packs have forgotten the old ways. They think strength alone will carry them through." "Strength matters," I said carefully, unsure why I was engaging in this conversation, why he was even still standing here, but so does memory, so does understanding where we came from. He turned that dark, assessing gaze on me. I felt pinned by it, like a butterfly under glass. "And what's your name?" "Emma, Your Majesty. Emma Whitfield." "Emma Whitfield." He repeated my name slowly, as if testing how it felt. "You're not dancing." Heat flooded my cheeks. Of course he had noticed. Everyone probably noticed. The old maid in the corner, too proud or too pathetic to even try anymore. I'm not much for dancing, Your Majesty." "Neither am I." He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "How old are you, Emma Whitfield?" The question hit like a physical blow. This was it. The moment when curiosity would turn to polite dismissal, when he would realize his mistake in even acknowledging me. Around us, I could feel eyes turning our way, whispers starting. The Lycan king, speaking to Emma Whitfield. The strangeness of it would fuel gossip for weeks. 32, Your Majesty." I waited for the reaction I had seen 100 times before. The slight withdrawal, the cooling of interest, the quick excuse to move on to younger, more suitable prospects. But King Nathaniel Strand did something I never expected. He smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face. The hardness softened, the exhaustion lifted, just for a moment, and those dark eyes warmed with something I couldn't name. 32, he repeated, and there was a note in his voice that made my heart stutter. Something almost like relief. Perfect. The word hung in the air between us, impossible and strange. I opened my mouth to respond, to ask what he could possibly mean, but his beta appeared at his shoulder, leaning in to whisper something urgent. The king's expression shuddered immediately, the brief warmth disappearing behind his mask of control. "We'll speak again," he said to me, and it sounded like a promise. Then he was gone, moving toward Alpha Dominic with his beta, leaving me pressed against the cold stone wall with my heart racing and my mind reeling. Caroline grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "What did he say to you?" she demanded. "Emma, what just happened?" But I couldn't answer. I didn't have words for what had just happened, for the way the Lycan king had looked at me like I was exactly what he'd been searching for. It made no sense. I was too old, too plain, too invisible, wasn't I? Across the hall, I caught the king looking back at me one more time before he disappeared into the private chambers with our Alpha. And in that glance, I saw something that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Recognition. I didn't sleep that night. Long after the gathering had ended, long after Caroline had finally stopped interrogating me and drifted off in the bed we shared, I lay awake staring at the rough wooden beams of our cottage ceiling. The king's words echoed in my mind, turning over and over like stones in a river. Perfect. What could he have meant? And why had he looked at me that way? As if he recognized something in me that I didn't even recognize in myself. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to gray the edges of our window when I finally gave up on sleep. I dressed quietly, pulling on my work dress and apron, and slipped out into the crisp morning air. The healing house was only a short walk from our cottage, and I needed the familiar comfort of my work, the simple clarity of tending to others. The village was still asleep, wrapped in mist that clung to the ground like gossamer. My breath formed small clouds in the cold air as I walked the familiar path, my feet knowing the way even in the dim light. But as I rounded the corner near the old well, I nearly collided with someone. "Careful," a male voice said, hand steadying me by the shoulders. I looked up into the face of the king's beta, the copper-haired man with the scar. Up close, he was even more imposing, but his gray eyes were kind as he released me and stepped back. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I didn't expect anyone to be awake." Neither did I. He studied me for a moment, then recognition flickered across his face. "You're Emma, the one His Majesty spoke with last night." Heat crept up my neck. "I am. And you are." "Gabriel, beta to King Nathaniel." He tilted his head, curiosity evident in his expression. "You're up early." "I work at the healing house. There are patients who need tending." I clutched my shawl tighter, suddenly aware of how plain I must look in my simple work clothes, hair hastily braided. Is the king still here?" "He is. We're staying through the week, actually." Gabriel's expression turned thoughtful. He wants to learn more about your pack. Said there's something different here. My heart skipped. A week. The king would be here for a week. I should let you get to your work, Gabriel said. But there was something in his tone that made me pause. Though I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other, Emma Whitfield. He walked away before I could ask what he meant, leaving me standing in the mist with more questions than answers. The healing house was a long, low building at the edge of the village, built from river stone and timber. Inside, it smelled of herbs and clean linen, of the salves I made, and the dried flowers hanging from the rafters. It was my sanctuary, the one place where my age didn't matter, where I was valued for my knowledge and my gentle hands. Old Thomas was my first patient of the morning, his arthritis always worse in the damp weather. I prepared a warm compress with arnica and willow bark, settling into the familiar rhythm of care. "Heard the king spoke to you last night?" Thomas said, his rheumy eyes sharp despite his age. "Whole village is talking about it." Of course they were. I kept my focus on wrapping his swollen joints. He asked about the runes on the pillars, that's all. "That's not what I heard." Thomas chuckled, then winced as I adjusted the compress. "Heard he called you perfect." My hands stilled. People mishear things, maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. Or maybe the king sees what the rest of us have been too blind to notice. "You're a good woman, Emma. Better than most half your age." The words were kindly meant, but they stung anyway. Better than most half my age, as if my worth could only be measured in comparison to my juniors. As if I needed that qualifier to matter. I was finishing with Thomas when the door opened and Alpha Dominic entered, looking harried. Behind him came the king. My breath caught. In the morning light streaming through the windows, Nathaniel Strand looked different somehow. Less the untouchable monarch, more the man I had glimpsed beneath the crown. He wore simple traveling clothes, leather and wool, and his dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Emma," Dominic said, his voice tight with barely concealed stress. "His Majesty requested to see the healing house. I told him you would be happy to show him around." It wasn't a request. I set aside the bandages I'd been organizing and wiped my hands on my apron. "Of course, Alpha." Dominic nodded, relieved, and practically fled. Thomas, the old fox, suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be, leaving me alone with a Lycan king in the quiet healing house. "You don't have to," Nathaniel said quietly, "if my presence makes you uncomfortable." "No, I took a breath, steadying myself. "You're welcome here, Your Majesty, though I'm afraid there's not much to see." "We're a small operation." He moved into the room, his gaze taking in everything with that same intense focus from the night before. He examined the dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, the rows of clay jars containing salves and tinctures, the clean beds waiting for patients. "You make all of these yourself?" he asked, gesturing to the remedies. "Most of them. Some recipes were passed down from the previous healer. Others I've developed through trial and error." I found myself relaxing slightly as I talked about my work. This at least I knew. This I could speak about with confidence. The mountains provide most of what we need. Arnica for pain, valerian for sleep, yarrow for wounds. And this? He had stopped in front of a particular jar, one filled with a silvery salve, moon blossom and silver birch. "It helps with the pain of shifting, for the younger ones who haven't learned to control it yet." I moved closer, forgetting for a moment who he was. The transformation can be agonizing when you're new to it. This eases the transition. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the jar. I've never seen anything like this. Our healers use brute force methods, letting the young ones suffer through it, saying it builds character. "It builds trauma," I said softly. "I've seen what happens when pain becomes the only teacher. These children need guidance, not torture." When he looked at me, there was something raw in his expression. "You speak from experience." It wasn't a question. I swallowed hard, old memories rising. My first shift nearly killed me. I was 13, and I fought it so hard that I damaged something inside. That's why I stopped, unsure why I was telling him this. "Why you what?" "Why I never found a mate." The words came out flat, factual. "The damage made it impossible for me to have children. And what male wants a barren mate? The silence that followed felt heavy, weighted with all the disappointments of my life. I busied myself reorganizing jars that didn't need organizing, unable to meet his eyes. Is that what you think? His voice was low, dangerous almost. That your only value lies in your ability to bear children? I think, I said carefully, that in our world, that's what most believe, and I've made peace with it. I have my work, my purpose. It's enough, Emma. He said my name like a command, and I looked up despite myself. He had moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Do you know why I came to this gathering? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Because I'm tired, he said simply. Tired of councils pushing young, simpering girls at me. Tired of women who want the crown, not the man. Tired of pretending that youth and fertility are the only things that matter in a mate. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. When I saw you last night, he continued, standing against that wall, studying those ancient runes while everyone else preened and performed, you looked like the only real thing in that entire hall. And when you told me your age, do you know what I thought? I couldn't breathe. What? Finally, he whispered. Finally, someone who understands. The door burst open, shattering the moment. Gabriel stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Sire, we have a problem. The scouts have spotted movement in the eastern woods. It might be nothing, but we don't assume anything is nothing. Nathaniel's transformation was instant, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the warrior king. Gather the others. I want a perimeter established. He turned back to me, and for just a moment, his hand brushed mine. The contact sent electricity up my arm. We'll continue this conversation, Emma. I promise you that. Then he was gone, Gabriel at his heels, leaving me standing in the healing house with my heart in chaos, and the ghost of his touch still warm on my skin. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Word spread quickly about the movement in the eastern woods, and the village shifted into a state of alert readiness. The king's third, a man named Isaiah, coordinated with our pack's warriors, establishing watch rotations and defensive positions. It was probably nothing, everyone said. Animals, perhaps, or travelers who didn't know they were skirting pack territory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. I threw myself into my work, treating minor injuries from the fortification efforts, preparing extra supplies just in case. Caroline came by in the afternoon, her face flushed with excitement and fear in equal measure. They say there might be rogues, she whispered. A whole band of them, displaced from the southern territories. Rogues. Lycans without packs, without the structure and rules that kept us civilized. They were dangerous, unpredictable, driven by base instincts and desperation. We don't know that yet, I said, though my hands trembled slightly as I ground herbs for a strengthening tonic. Emma. Caroline gripped my arm. What happened with the king this morning? People are saying he was here for hours. He was here for maybe 20 minutes, I corrected. He wanted to see the healing house. And nothing. We talked about herbs. It was the truth mostly. I wasn't ready to share the rest, wasn't ready to examine what his words had meant or why they had shaken me so deeply. Caroline looked skeptical, but dropped it, helping me prepare supplies until the sun began to set. As darkness fell, I stood at the window of the healing house, watching torches being lit throughout the village. Warriors moved in coordinated patterns, their efficiency speaking to years of training. And somewhere out there, in the command center that had been set up in Alpha Dominic's home, the Lycan King was making decisions that could affect all our lives. I thought about what he'd said, finally someone who understands. What did he think I understood? Loneliness? Loss? The weight of continuing when everything inside you wanted to stop? A knock at the door made me jump. I opened it to find a young messenger, barely 16, breathless from running. Miss Emma, Alpha Dominic requests your presence at the command center. He says the king has need of your knowledge. My knowledge? What kind of knowledge? The Eastern Woods, miss. He said you know them better than anyone. It was true. I had spent years foraging in those woods, learning every trail and hollow, every place where useful plants grew. But why would the king need that information? I grabbed my cloak and followed the messenger through the darkening village. The command center was ablaze with light and activity. Maps were spread across every surface, and the room hummed with tense energy. Alpha Dominic, Gabriel, Isaiah, and several of our pack's senior warriors crowded around the main table. And at the center of it all stood Nathaniel, his presence commanding despite the chaos around him. His eyes found mine the moment I entered, and something in my chest loosened and tightened simultaneously. "Emma," he said, and the room fell silent. "Thank you for coming. I need you to tell me everything you know about the eastern woods. Every trail, every cave, every place someone could hide or stage an ambush." I moved to the table, looking down at the crude map someone had drawn. The eastern woods are extensive. They run for miles, all the way to the ridgeline. "But you know them." It wasn't a question. "Yes." I picked up a piece of charcoal, my hands steadying as I focused on something concrete. "There are 3 main trails, but dozens of game paths. Here," I marked a spot on the map. "There's a series of caves. They're not large, but they're well hidden. And here," another mark. "The old oak grove. The trees are so thick that even in daylight it's dark as twilight." I continued marking locations, explaining sightlines and water sources, places of strategic value or danger. The men listened intently, and I felt the weight of their attention. But it was Nathaniel's focus that burned brightest. "This hollow," he said, pointing to one of my marks. "You're certain it can't be seen from the main trail?" "Certain. I've used it myself during storms. You could hide an entire—" I stopped, realizing what I was saying. "You could hide a lot of people there." His jaw tightened. "That's what I was afraid of." Gabriel leaned over the map. "If they're using the caves in the hollow, they could move a significant force through that area undetected." "Not undetected," I said quietly. "The woods talk if you know how to listen. The birds go silent when strangers pass. The deer change their patterns, and there's a particular echo in the hollow. Sound carries differently there." Nathaniel looked at me with something like wonder. "You really do know these woods. I've spent half my life in them, Your Majesty." "Nathaniel," he said softly. "When we're working, call me Nathaniel." The informality shocked the room into silence. Alpha Dominic's eyebrows shot up. Gabriel and Isaiah exchanged glances, but Nathaniel's gaze never left mine. "Nathaniel," I repeated, testing the name, and watched something fierce and warm flash in his eyes. "Good." He turned back to the map, but I could have sworn I saw the ghost of a smile. "Now, tell me about the approaches to this hollow. If we needed to scout it without being detected, what's the best route?" We worked through the night, planning and strategizing. I had never been part of something like this before, had never been valued for anything beyond my healing skills. But Nathaniel listened to every word I said, incorporated every detail into his plans. He treated my knowledge as essential, my input as valuable, and slowly, I began to see myself through his eyes. Not as too old, or barren, or invisible, but as someone who mattered. Dawn broke cold and sharp, painting the sky in shades of steel and rose. I had stayed at the command center through the night, dozing fitfully in a chair while the men took turns keeping watch and refining their strategy. When I woke, my neck was stiff, and Nathaniel's cloak was draped over my shoulders. I touched the heavy fabric, still warm, and looked around. The room had emptied except for Isaiah, who stood by the window studying the lightening sky. "He left an hour ago," Isaiah said without turning. "Took Gabriel and a small scouting party to check the eastern perimeter." My stomach clenched with worry I had no right to feel. "Is that safe?" "Safe?" Isaiah finally looked at me, his dark eyes unreadable. "No, but necessary. The king doesn't ask his people to take risks he won't take himself." I stood, folding the cloak carefully. "I should return this to him, keep it for now." Isaiah moved away from the window, studying me with the same intense focus I'd noticed the night of the gathering. "You've made quite an impression, Emma Whitfield. I was just answering questions about the woods." "Were you?" A slight smile played at his lips. I've known Nathaniel for 15 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Heat flooded my face. You're mistaken. I'm just... Don't. His voice was gentle but firm. Don't diminish yourself. Whatever you think you are, whatever this pack has made you believe about your worth, forget it. The Lycan King sees what he sees, and he doesn't make mistakes about people. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Caroline stood there, her face pale, her hands shaking. Emma, you need to come. Now. My healer's instincts kicked in immediately. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Not me. It's Father Morrison. He collapsed during morning prayers. They've brought him to the healing house. But Emma, he's not breathing right. I grabbed my medical bag and ran, Nathaniel's cloak streaming behind me like dark wings. Father Morrison was the oldest member of our pack, nearly 80, but he'd been healthy just yesterday. As I burst through the healing house doors, I found him on one of the beds, his skin gray, his breathing shallow and labored. Everyone out, I commanded, my voice brooking no argument. Caroline, I need hot water and clean cloths. Someone find Dr. Webb from the next village. Ride hard. My hands moved on instinct, checking his pulse, examining his eyes, listening to his chest. His heartbeat was irregular, stuttering. I'd seen this before, in elderly patients whose hearts simply grew too tired to continue. Emma. His voice was a papery whisper. Don't fuss. Hush, I said gently, preparing a tincture of hawthorn and motherwort. Save your strength. No strength. Left. His gnarled hand caught mine. Been waitin' to tell you. Watched you grow up. Watched them overlook you. Fools. Father. Not finished. He coughed, and I supported his head, helping him sip the tincture. King sees it. Sees what you are. Don't run from it, child. Don't run from being seen. His eyes closed, his breathing easing slightly as the medicine took effect. I worked through the morning, monitoring him, adjusting his treatments, refusing to let death claim him without a fight. Dr. Webb arrived by midday, examined my patient, and nodded his approval of my care. You've done everything right, he said quietly. Now we wait, and hope his heart is strong enough. It was late afternoon when Nathaniel returned. I heard the commotion outside, the scouting party riding back into the village, voices raised in urgent discussion. I wanted to go to him, to make sure he was unharmed, but I couldn't leave my patient. He came to me instead. I was changing Father Morrison's compress when the door opened, and Nathaniel entered, still in his scouting gear, dirt on his face and exhaustion in his eyes. But he was whole, unhurt. Relief made my knees weak. I heard about Father Morrison, he said quietly. How is he? Stable, for now. I wrung out the cloth, my hand steadier than my voice. His heart is failing. It's a matter of time, but I'll make sure he's comfortable. Nathaniel moved closer, looking down at the old man sleeping peacefully now. He married me and my first queen, he said softly. 20 years ago. He traveled all the way to the capital for the ceremony. I hadn't known that. He never mentioned it. He wouldn't. Father Morrison keeps confidences better than anyone I've ever met. He turned to me, and in the fading afternoon light, I could see new lines of worry etched around his eyes. We found tracks, a large group, moving through the eastern woods just as you predicted. My breath caught. Rogues? We don't know yet, but whoever they are, they're organized and trying to stay hidden. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. I've sent word to the capital for reinforcements, but they won't arrive for 3 days at the earliest. What do we do until then? We prepare, we watch. We hope we're wrong about their intentions. He looked at me with an intensity that made my pulse race. Emma, I need to ask something of you. It's not fair, and you have every right to refuse. Ask. If something happens, if they attack, the healing house will become critical. You'll be treating wounded, and that makes you valuable. That also makes you a target. His jaw clenched. I want to assign you a personal guard. Gabriel will stay with you when I can't." The implication of those words hit me like a physical force, when he couldn't. As if protecting me personally was something he intended to do. "I don't need—" "Please." The single word, raw with emotion, stopped my protest. "I've lost too many people I cared about. I won't lose you too, people he cared about. Did that include me? How could it, after just 2 days?" But looking into his eyes, I saw the truth. Whatever was happening between us, it was real to him. Impossibly, inexplicably real. "All right," I whispered. "I'll accept the guard." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "Thank you." He glanced back at Father Morrison. "I should let you work. But Emma, tonight, after the evening meal, will you walk with me? There are things I need to tell you, things I need you to understand." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes." He left, taking some essential part of the air with him, and I sank into the chair beside Father Morrison's bed. The old man's eyes cracked open, a knowing gleam in their depths. "Told you," he rasped. "Being seen." Despite everything, I smiled. The hours until evening crawled by with agonizing slowness. Gabriel arrived to stand guard, positioning himself outside the healing house with the casual alertness of a trained warrior. "Doctor." Webb left after securing my promise to send word if Father Morrison's condition changed. Caroline brought me dinner, stew and bread I barely tasted, and tried unsuccessfully to extract information about my upcoming walk with the king. "It's just a walk," I told her, though my hands trembled as I braided my hair, "with the Lycan king, who looks at you like you're the moon and stars." She helped me into my better dress, forest green wool embroidered with small white flowers at the hem. "Emma, do you understand what's happening?" "No," I admitted. "I don't understand any of it. Maybe you don't need to understand. Maybe you just need to feel." But feeling was dangerous. Feeling led to hope, and hope had disappointed me too many times before. As twilight descended, painting the village in shades of purple and gold, Nathaniel appeared at the healing house door. He had changed into clean clothes, simple but well made, and someone had convinced him to shave. He looked younger like this, less the untouchable monarch and more the man beneath the crown. "Ready?" he asked, extending his hand. I took it, his calloused palm warm against mine, and let him lead me into the gathering dusk. We walked in silence at first, following a path that led away from the village center toward the old orchards. The apple trees were bare now, their branches dark against the dimming sky. But in spring they would bloom white and fragrant. I had always loved this place, its quiet beauty. "Tell me about your life," Nathaniel said finally. "Not what you think I want to hear, the truth. What it's been like for you." So I told him. About being 17 and hopeful, waiting for the mate bond that never came. About watching my friends pair off one by one while I remained alone. About the slow dawning realization that something was wrong with me, that the damage from my first shift had marked me as unsuitable. About my mother's gentle disappointment and my father's awkward silences before he passed. "I stopped going to gatherings for a while," I said, staring at the twisted branches above us. "It hurt too much, watching everyone else find what I couldn't have. But Caroline convinced me to try again. She said maybe I was looking for the wrong thing. Was she right? I don't know. I stopped looking at all eventually, focused on my work instead. The healing house needed me, and that felt like enough." I glanced at him. "It was enough, until what? Until you looked at me like I mattered." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. In the fading light, his eyes were almost black, fathomless. "Emma, you need to understand something. I didn't come to this gathering looking for a mate. I came because my council was driving me mad with their matchmaking attempts, and I thought observing a remote pack's traditions would give me a respectable excuse to escape the capital for a while." My heart sank. So it had all been coincidence then. Chance, nothing more. "But then I saw you," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "Standing there against that wall, invisible to everyone else, and I felt something I haven't felt in a decade. Recognition. Like my soul knew yours before my mind caught up. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only stare at him as he stepped closer. "I'm 43 years old," he said. I've lived through loss and war and betrayal. I've ruled a kingdom and made impossible choices. And in all that time, I never thought I'd feel this again. This pull toward another person, this need to know everything about them, to protect them, to simply be near them. Nathaniel, I know it's fast. I know it seems impossible. You've known me for 2 days. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. But I also know what I feel. And I know that you feel it too, don't you? Yes, I whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside. But I don't understand how. I'm not young or beautiful or... You're real, he interrupted fiercely. You're intelligent and compassionate and strong in ways that have nothing to do with physical power. You see the world clearly, without illusions. You've survived rejection and disappointment, and you're still here, still caring for others, still finding beauty in bare apple trees. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're everything I've been looking for, and didn't know I needed. Tears burned in my eyes. I can't give you children. The damage... I don't care. The words were immediate. Absolute. Emma, I lost a child once. The pain nearly destroyed me. If I never have another, I'll survive. But if I lose the chance to be with you because of some archaic idea that a woman's only value lies in her womb, that I couldn't survive, the council will never accept. The council serves me, not the other way around. His forehead touched mine, and I felt his breath warm against my lips. I'm not asking you to decide everything tonight. I'm just asking you to give this a chance. Give us a chance. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was madness. 2 days. We'd known each other for 2 days, but my heart, my battered, hopeful heart, recognized the truth in his words. This was real. Impossible and terrifying and absolutely real. All right, I breathed. A chance. He kissed me then, soft and careful, as if I were something precious that might break. I kissed him back, pouring 15 years of loneliness and longing into the connection, feeling something inside me crack open and bloom. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, a wolf's howl shattered the moment. It came from the eastern woods, long and haunting and distinctly hostile. Within seconds, it was answered by another, then another, until the air filled with a chorus of warning. Nathaniel's entire body tensed, the warrior replacing the man in an instant. They're coming. Get back to the village, now. But, now, Emma, please. He gripped my shoulders. Go to the healing house. Prepare for wounded. Gabriel will protect you. More howls rose, closer this time. In the distance, I could see torches being lit throughout the village as our pack mobilized. Nathaniel pulled me into one more fierce, fast kiss, then released me. Go! I ran, my heart pounding, Nathaniel's taste still on my lips and the sound of approaching danger filling my ears. Behind me, I heard him shift, the wet tear of transformation, the deep growl of his Lycan form. Then he was gone, racing toward the threat with the speed and power that had made him king. I burst into the village to find controlled chaos. Warriors were forming defensive lines. Families were securing homes. Alpha Dominic was shouting orders, his voice barely audible over the rising cacophony. Gabriel met me at the healing house door, his expression grim. Inside. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me or the king. How many? At least 30. Maybe more. He drew his weapon, a long silver blade that gleamed in the torchlight. They're not just passing through, Emma. This is an attack. The first sounds of combat reached us. Snarls and screams, the clash of bodies and weapons. I wanted to be sick, wanted to hide, wanted to run. But people would be hurt. People would need me. I squared my shoulders and entered the healing house, lighting every lamp, preparing every remedy, laying out bandages and surgical tools with shaking hands. Father Morrison stirred in his bed, his old eyes finding mine. What happens? Rogues, I said shortly. We're under attack. He struggled to sit up, and I helped him, propping pillows behind his frail back. Then we fight. You need to rest. No. His grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. What I need is to see my pack survive. He looked toward the door, toward the sounds of battle. What you need is to be ready. He was right. So I prepared. And I waited. And I prayed that when Nathaniel returned, it would be whole and alive and victorious. Because I had just found him. I couldn't lose him now. The first wounded arrived within minutes. Gabriel hauled in a young warrior named Thomas. Not old Thomas, but his grandson, with deep claw marks across his chest. Blood soaked through his shirt, dark and terrifying in the lamplight. I pushed down my fear and became the healer I'd trained to be. Set him on the table, I commanded, already reaching for my supplies. Hold him steady. The wounds were deep but clean, Lycan claws, which meant they'd heal faster than normal injuries if I could stop the bleeding and prevent infection. I worked quickly, cleaning and stitching while Thomas gritted his teeth against the pain. Gabriel held him down with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this before. How bad is it out there? I asked, tying off another suture. Bad enough. They hit us in 3 places simultaneously. Coordinated attack. Gabriel's jaw was tight. Professional. These aren't just displaced rogues. They're organized. More wounded came. Sarah, one of our best scouts, with a broken arm. Michael with burns from silver-laced weapons. Old Thomas hobbled in, supporting a teenager who'd taken a blade to the thigh. I moved between them all, my hands steady even as my heart raced, treating and stabilizing and sending the able-bodied back to the fight. Father Morrison, defying all medical logic, had risen from his bed and was helping as best he could, holding hands, offering prayers, fetching supplies when I needed them. His color was better, as if the crisis had given him a reason to keep fighting. Where's the king? I asked Gabriel during a brief lull, my hands washing blood from my instruments. Last I saw, he was leading the defense at the eastern perimeter. Gabriel's expression was carefully neutral. He fights like a man possessed. The doors burst open again and my stomach dropped. Isaiah staggered in, supporting another warrior, but it was the man on Isaiah's other side that made my breath stop, Nathaniel. He was in human form, blood streaming from a gash across his shoulder, his face pale beneath the dirt and gore. Our eyes met, and I saw relief flash through his pain. I'm fine, he said immediately. See to the others first. Like hell. I guided him to a chair, ignoring his protests. Isaiah, how bad? Silverblade caught him. He shifted to heal it, but silver disrupts the healing process. I finished. Silver wounds required different treatment. They festered if not properly cleaned, poisoning the blood. Everyone else wait. This can't wait. I heard murmurs behind me, the shock of me ordering the Lycan king around, the audacity of prioritizing him over pack members. But Nathaniel's hand caught mine, his grip weak. Emma, don't. Your pack comes first. My pack will be fine for 5 minutes. You won't if this isn't treated immediately. I met his eyes, letting him see my fear. Please, let me help you. He nodded, and I went to work. The wound was deep, the silver having burned the edges of the flesh. I cleaned it with blessed water, one of the few things that could draw out silver poison, and Nathaniel hissed through his teeth but didn't move. You're going to have a scar, I said quietly. I have many scars. One more won't matter. His free hand found my waist, steadying himself. How are you holding up? I'm terrified, I admitted, applying a poultice of plantain and activated charcoal to draw out the poison. But I can't afford to fall apart. Too many people need me. That's what makes you strong, functioning despite the fear. His eyes were intent on my face. I'm sorry you have to see this, see me like this. Like what? Human? Vulnerable? I began wrapping his shoulder with clean bandages. Nathaniel, I don't need you to be invincible. I just need you to be alive. Something fierce and tender flashed in his eyes. Then I'll do my best to accommodate. A tremendous crash from outside made us both jump. The sounds of fighting had grown closer. Too close. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Sire, they've broken through the western line. They're pushing into the village. Nathaniel stood immediately, swaying slightly. I grabbed his good arm to steady him. You can't go back out there. Not with that wound. I don't have a choice. He cupped my face with his uninjured hand. "Gabriel, you stay here. Protect this place with your life." "Nathaniel," I started. He kissed me, hard and desperate, then pulled back. "I will come back to you, I promise." Then he was gone, shifting mid-stride into his massive Lycan form, dark fur rippling with power despite his injury. I watched him disappear into the chaos, my heart in my throat. "He will come back," Gabriel said quietly. "I've never seen him break a promise." I wanted to believe that. I had to believe that. The fighting drew closer. I could hear it now, the snarls and screams, the crash of bodies against buildings. The wounded kept coming, faster now, more of them, injuries more severe. I worked until my hands ached and my back screamed, until blood soaked my dress and exhaustion made my movements clumsy. Father Morrison collapsed around midnight. I left the others in Gabriel's care and rushed to his side, but even as I checked his pulse, I knew his heart had finally given out. He'd spent his last reserves helping others, and now there was nothing left. "No," I whispered, beginning chest compressions anyway. "Father, stay with me." His hand caught mine, surprisingly strong for a dying man. "Emma, enough. I can save you. My time is done." He smiled peaceful. "But yours is just beginning. Take it, take the chance. He's offering." His eyes closed. His breath stopped. And Father Morrison, who had married a king and kept confidences and believed in me when no one else did, was gone. I closed his eyes gently, tears streaming down my face. There was no time to grieve. More wounded needed me, but I allowed myself one moment of silence. One whispered thank you to the old man who'd seen me clearly. Then I returned to work. The night stretched endlessly. At some point, Caroline arrived with other women from the village, helping tend to the wounded, fetching supplies, holding hands. Dr. Webb returned, taking over the more serious cases while I handled the constant stream of minor injuries. Dawn was breaking when the sounds of fighting finally ceased. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. I stood at the healing house door, Gabriel beside me, both of us staring out at the village. Smoke rose from several buildings. Bodies, both rogue and pack, littered the ground. Survivors moved among them, checking for signs of life, beginning the grim work of recovery. "Do you see him?" I whispered. Gabriel scanned the chaos. "Not yet." My chest constricted. Not yet didn't mean never, but it didn't mean safe either. Then I saw him. Nathaniel emerged from behind the meeting hall, still in Lycan form, limping but upright. As I watched, he shifted back to human, someone throwing a cloak over his nakedness. His shoulder was bleeding again, the bandages I'd applied long since destroyed. But he was alive. He was alive. I didn't remember deciding to run. One moment I was at the door. The next I was crossing the distance between us, dodging debris and injured fighters. Nathaniel saw me coming and opened his arms, catching me against his chest despite his wounds. "You're hurt," I said against his shoulder, even as I clung to him. "I'm alive. That's what matters." He held me tighter. "We won, Emma. They're retreating." I pulled back enough to see his face. He looked haggard, older, the night's violence written in the lines around his eyes. But he was here. Whole. Real. Father Morrison died, I told him quietly. His heart gave out helping the wounded. Pain flickered across Nathaniel's features. He died as he lived, in service. He touched my hair, my face, as if reassuring himself I was unharmed. "I'm sorry you had to lose him. I'm sorry you did too." We stood there in the growing light, holding each other while the village began the work of healing around us. Alpha Dominic approached, looking exhausted but relieved. "Your Majesty, thanks to your leadership, our losses were minimal. Without your warriors and tactics, without Emma's knowledge of the eastern woods, they would have caught us completely unprepared," Nathaniel interrupted. "And without her healing skills, many more would have died tonight. The credit belongs to your pack, Alpha. You have strong people." Dominic looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. "Emma has always been one of our finest. We're fortunate to have her. It was a small thing, that acknowledgement. But from a man who'd never seen me as more than the pack spinster, it meant something. "I need to check the perimeter," Nathaniel said reluctantly. "Make sure they're truly gone. But Emma..." He hesitated, something vulnerable crossing his features. "Will you wait for me? I have something I need to ask you." My heart stuttered. "Of course." He kissed my forehead and left with Isaiah and several warriors. I returned to the healing house, to the wounded who still needed care, to the endless work of tending and mending. Caroline found me mid-morning, as I was finally allowing myself to sit down with a cup of tea. "The whole village is talking," she said, perching on the edge of Father Morrison's now empty bed. "About you and the king. Let them talk." I was too tired to care about gossip. "Emma." She took my hand. "He's going to ask you to go with him to the capital. Everyone knows it." The tea turned bitter in my mouth. "That's not... We barely know each other." "You know enough." Her eyes were serious. "The question is, what will you say when he asks?" I didn't have an answer. Leaving the village meant leaving everything I'd ever known. My work, my home, my sister. But staying meant losing Nathaniel. Losing this impossible connection that had somehow formed in just days. "I don't know," I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "Then figure it out. Because he's not the kind of man who offers his heart lightly, and neither are you." Nathaniel returned as the sun reached its zenith. He'd cleaned up, changed clothes, and had his shoulder properly bandaged. He looked more like a king again, less like the wounded warrior I'd held at dawn. "Walk with me?" he asked. We walked to the orchard again, to the place where he'd kissed me before the world exploded into violence. The bare trees seemed different now, touched by what we'd survived. "Reinforcements arrived an hour ago," he said. "They'll stay to help rebuild and ensure the rogues don't return. The threat is over." "That's good. It means I need to return to the capital. Tomorrow." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Emma, I know this is fast. I know it's insane. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer." My heart hammered. "All right. Come with me, to the capital. Not as my mistress or some temporary amusement. As my chosen mate. My queen." He took my hands, his grip gentle but firm. "I know I'm asking you to leave your home. I know I'm asking you to step into a world that will judge you, that will whisper about your age and your inability to provide heirs. But I'm also offering you a place where you'll be valued, where your intelligence and compassion will matter, where you'll be seen." Tears blurred my vision. "Nathaniel, I'm not promising it will be easy. The council will fight this. Society will talk. But I don't care. I've lived 43 years, Emma. I've had a traditional mate chosen for politics. I've done my duty. Now I want to choose for myself. And I choose you." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why me?" "Because when I look at you, I see home. Because you're brave enough to tell a king he's wrong, and gentle enough to comfort the dying. Because you've survived rejection and disappointment, and you're still capable of love." His thumb stroked across my knuckles. "Because you're perfect for me, exactly as you are." I thought about my life here, the healing house that had been my refuge. The village that had never quite known what to do with me. The years of being overlooked, invisible, too old for anyone to want. Then I thought about how Nathaniel looked at me. Like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, I'll come with you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled me into his arms, lifting me off the ground, and I laughed despite my tears. When he set me down, he kissed me properly, deeply, a promise of all the days to come. "You won't regret this," he murmured against my lips. "I know." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation and goodbyes. News of my engagement to the Lycan king spread through the village like wildfire, generating reactions that ranged from genuine happiness to barely concealed shock. Some celebrated, Caroline most vocally, though her joy was tinged with the sadness of impending separation. Others whispered behind their hands, unable to reconcile the spinster healer with the woman who'd captured a king's heart. I found I didn't care much about the whispers anymore. Dr. Webb arrived at the healing house mid-morning, his weathered face creased with concern. "Emma, I need to speak with you about the transition. The village will need a new healer. The reality of what I was leaving hit me then. The healing house had been my sanctuary for over a decade, my purpose when I'd thought I had no other. The thought of abandoning it felt like betraying an old friend. I've been thinking about that, I said, organizing supplies one last time. There's a young woman, Rebecca, who's been studying with me for the past year. She has the gift, the patience, and the dedication. With your guidance, she could take over. Dr. Webb nodded slowly. Rebecca is talented. But Emma, you built this place into something special. Your knowledge, your approach to healing, it's not easily replaced. Nothing is irreplaceable, I met his eyes. But everything I've learned, I've documented. Every remedy, every technique. It's all written down for Rebecca to study, and you'll be here to help her. Will you be happy? The question was gentle but piercing. In the capital, surrounded by politics and protocol, you've always been most at home here, with your herbs and your patience. I considered the question carefully. Would I miss this? Absolutely. Would I regret my choice? I didn't think so. I'll build something new, I said finally. The capital has people who need healing too. And I'll have Nathaniel. His name felt right on my tongue now. Familiar, for the first time in my life, Dr. Webb. Someone has chosen me. Not settled for me, not pitied me, chosen me. How could I not be happy? He embraced me then, this gruff old man who'd been my mentor and friend. Then go with my blessing. But Emma, don't let them change you. The capital has a way of dimming bright lights. Stay exactly who you are. Caroline helped me pack, though helped was a generous term, given how much crying was involved. We sorted through my meager possessions, mostly books, healing tools, and simple clothes that would be hopelessly inadequate for court life. They'll give you new clothes, Caroline said, folding one of my worn dresses, silks and velvets probably. You'll look like a fairy tale. I'll look ridiculous. I held up my reflection in the small mirror. Same pale blonde hair going silver, same ordinary face. Caroline, what if I get there and he realizes he's made a mistake? What if... Stop. She gripped my shoulders. I've watched you doubt yourself your entire life. I've watched this village make you feel small and invisible, but I saw how he looked at you, Emma. That man would burn the world down before he let you go. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. She pulled me into a fierce hug. You're going to be a queen. My sister, the queen. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I'm so proud of you I could burst. I'm going to miss you. The words came out thick with tears. You better, but you'll visit, right? Queens can visit as often as possible. I promise. Alpha Dominic requested an audience that afternoon. I met him in his study, uncomfortable in the formal setting. He'd never summoned me before. Our interactions had always been functional. Healer to Alpha. Nothing more. Emma. He gestured to a chair. Please sit. I sat, hands folded in my lap, waiting. I owe you an apology, he said after a long moment. For years I've overlooked you, taken your service for granted, allowed others to dismiss you because of your age, your situation. He looked genuinely pained. It took the Lycan king seeing your worth to make me recognize what I'd been blind to. That's shameful. I didn't know what to say. An apology was the last thing I'd expected. You saved lives during the attack, he continued. Your knowledge of the woods prevented a massacre, and now you're leaving us to become a queen. And I find myself wondering how we'll manage without you. He leaned forward. I'm not asking you to stay. I have no right. But I want you to know that you've always been valuable to this pack. I just failed to see it. Thank you, Alpha. The words felt inadequate but genuine. That means more than you know. Will you... He hesitated. Will you speak well of us at court? The Northern Territories could use allies. So there it was, the political angle. But I found I wasn't angry about it. This was his role, protecting the pack through alliances and diplomacy. I'll speak well of you because it's deserved, I said. This pack raised me. It gave me purpose when I had none. I'll always be grateful for that. He nodded, relief evident. Then go with our blessing, Emma, and know that you'll always have a home here. should you need one. Nathaniel found me in the healing house at sunset, packing the last of my medicinal supplies. He'd been occupied all day with his warriors, ensuring the village's defenses were properly established before his departure. Now he looked tired, but content as he watched me work. "You're bringing your herbs?" he asked, amused. "Old habits." I wrapped a jar of lavender salve carefully. "I know the capital has healers, but you can't quite let go of being a healer yourself." He moved behind me, arms encircling my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. "Good. I don't want you to change, Emma. The capital has enough ornamental queens. It needs one who actually helps people." I leaned back against him, letting his strength support me. "Are you sure about this? Once we leave tomorrow, everyone will know. Your council, your court, they'll fight you on this choice. Let them fight." His voice was utterly certain. "I'm the king. They serve at my pleasure, not the other way around." "But, Emma," he turned me to face him. "Listen to me. I've spent 10 years doing everything right, making the proper decisions, choosing duty over desire, being the king everyone needed me to be. It nearly destroyed me. I won't do it anymore. I don't want to be the reason you're at odds with your own court. You're not the reason, they are. Them and their outdated ideas about what makes a suitable queen." His hands framed my face. "You're intelligent, compassionate, brave. You understand sacrifice and service. You've survived hardship without becoming hard. Those are the qualities I need in a partner. Those are the qualities my kingdom needs in a queen." "What about heirs?" I had to ask, had to voice the fear that gnawed at me. "Every king needs... I have cousins. The succession is secure." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. "And if we decide we want children, there are other ways. Adoption, fostering. But Emma, I need you to understand. I'm not choosing you despite your inability to bear children. I'm choosing you because of who you are. The rest is just details." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You existed. You were yourself. That was enough." He kissed me softly. "Now finish packing. We leave at dawn, and I have one more thing to show you before we go." He led me through the village as darkness fell, past the newly repaired buildings and the warriors standing watch. We climbed the hill behind the settlement, following a narrow path I'd walked countless times in my youth. At the top, where the land flattened into a meadow, he stopped. From here, we could see everything. The village below with its warm lights, the dark forest beyond, the mountains rising in the distance. The harvest moon hung full and luminous in the clear sky, painting the world in silver. "This is where I first saw you," Nathaniel said quietly. "Before the gathering, before I even entered the hall. I came up here to clear my head, to prepare myself for another pointless evening of pretense, and I saw you walking alone through the village, heading to the healing house." I stared at him. "That was you?" I felt someone watching but thought I'd imagined it. "You moved with such purpose, such certainty. Everyone else was preparing for the gathering, focused on appearance and impression, but you were just being yourself, going where you were needed." He pulled me against his side, both of us gazing at the view. "I asked Gabriel to find out who you were. He told me you were the pack's healer, unmarried, dedicated to your work. I thought about approaching you then, but I wasn't sure." He trailed off. "Wasn't sure of what? If I was ready to feel again, if I could handle wanting someone when I'd convinced myself I was better off alone." He looked down at me. "But then I saw you at the gathering, and I knew running wasn't going to work anymore." I pressed closer to him, overwhelmed by the revelation. He'd noticed me before the gathering, before anyone else had looked twice. "I was invisible my whole life," I whispered, "and you saw me. You were never invisible, Emma. People were just looking at the wrong things." We stood there as the moon rose higher, as the night grew cold and the village below settled into sleep. Tomorrow we would leave for the capital, for a life I could barely imagine. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. "I love you," I said, the words surprising us both. "I know it's fast and probably foolish, but I do." His arms tightened around me. "Then we're both fools, because I love you too." Dawn came too quickly. The village gathered to see us off, a smaller crowd than I'd expected, but genuine in their well wishes. Caroline clung to me until the last possible moment, making me promise to write, to visit, to remember where I came from. I'll never forget, I assured her. You're my sister. Distance doesn't change that. Rebecca, my successor at the healing house, accepted my medical bag with trembling hands. I'll do my best to honor what you've built. Build something better, I told her. Don't just maintain, grow. That's the real legacy. Alpha Dominic presented Nathaniel with a formal alliance proposal, which the king accepted with appropriate ceremony. Gabriel and Isaiah supervised the loading of our small caravan, royal guards, supplies, and my pathetically few belongings. Ready? Nathaniel asked, extending his hand. I looked back at the village one last time. The healing house where I'd found my purpose. The cottage where I'd grown up. The orchards where I'd walked alone for so many years. This place had shaped me, sheltered me, sometimes hurt me, but it had also prepared me for this moment. Ready, I said, taking his hand. The journey to the capital took 3 days. We traveled in comfort, surrounded by guards, stopping at inns where Nathaniel's presence commanded the best rooms and service. At night, we talked for hours about his kingdom, his hopes for reform, his struggles with the conservative council. About my healing work, my love of old lore, my dreams for establishing proper medical facilities throughout the realm. You're thinking like a queen already, he said on the second night, as we sat by the fire in our private room. I'm thinking like a healer who happens to have access to resources now. That's what makes you perfect for this role. He pulled me against his chest. You see needs and want to fill them. That's what good rulers do. What about when your council fights me on it? And they will, then we'll fight them together. The capital appeared on the horizon late in the afternoon of the 3rd day, a sprawling city of stone and timber, dominated by the castle that crowned the central hill. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, so much larger and grander than anything I'd ever seen. It's overwhelming at first, Nathaniel said, noting my expression. But you'll adapt. You're stronger than you think. The streets were crowded, people stopping to stare as the royal caravan passed. I heard the whispers. Who was the woman riding beside the king? Where had she come from? She looked so ordinary. I lifted my chin and kept my eyes forward, refusing to shrink under their scrutiny. The castle was even more impressive up close, ancient and imposing, with towers that seemed to pierce the sky. Servants rushed to greet us, and I felt suddenly, completely out of my depth. But Nathaniel's hand found mine, steadying me, one step at a time, he murmured. You don't have to learn everything today. A woman in elegant robes approached, the seneschal, I guessed from her bearing. She bowed to Nathaniel, then turned sharp eyes on me. Your Majesty, welcome home. And this is Emma Whitfield, my chosen mate and your future queen, Nathaniel said, his voice brooking no argument. She will be treated with all the respect and courtesy due to her position. See to it personally, Helena. Helena's eyes widened fractionally, but she recovered quickly. Of course, Your Majesty. Welcome, Lady Emma. I'll prepare appropriate quarters and arrange for— She'll stay in my chambers, Nathaniel interrupted. We'll formalize the mating bond within the week. Send word to the council that I'll address them tomorrow. The next days were a whirlwind. I met endless streams of people, courtiers, servants, officials, all assessing me with varying degrees of skepticism. Nathaniel's council was especially hostile, a group of older men who made their disapproval abundantly clear. She's too old, one of them, Lord Pemberton, said directly to Nathaniel during my first council meeting. The king requires a mate who can produce heirs. The king requires a mate who can rule beside him with wisdom and compassion, Nathaniel replied coldly, which Emma possesses in abundance. My decision is final, but Your Majesty, the bloodline, is secure through my cousin's children. This discussion is over. I sat through these meetings, learning the political landscape, beginning to understand the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed the kingdom. It was exhausting and fascinating in equal measure, but Nathaniel was right. I was stronger than I thought. When Lord Pemberton tried to dismiss one of my suggestions for improving medical care in the lower districts, I didn't back down. With respect, Lord Pemberton, preventative care reduces the overall cost to the crown. Healthy citizens are productive citizens. Or would you prefer to continue losing workers to preventable diseases? The silence that followed was absolute. Then Nathaniel smiled. As my queen-to-be says, we'll implement her proposal. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the council began to warm to me. Not all. Some would never accept a queen who hadn't been born to nobility, who was past her prime, who couldn't give the king children, but enough softened that I began to see a path forward. Gabriel and Isaiah became unexpected allies, running interference with the more hostile courtiers, and teaching me the unwritten rules of court politics. Isaiah's mate, a sharp-witted woman named Diana, took me under her wing, helping me navigate social functions without making too many mistakes. They'll talk no matter what you do, Diana advised. So you might as well give them something worth talking about. The mating ceremony was held exactly 1 week after our arrival. It was a smaller affair than tradition dictated. Nathaniel had insisted on intimacy over spectacle. The ancient ritual was performed in the castle's oldest chapel, witnessed only by close friends and a handful of council members who couldn't reasonably be excluded. When Nathaniel placed the royal mark on my shoulder, a permanent sign of our bond, I felt something shift deep inside me, a connection snapping into place, a rightness I'd never experienced before. "You are mine," he said, the traditional words carrying weight beyond mere ceremony, "as I am yours, from this day until our last." "From this day until our last," I repeated, and meant it with every fiber of my being. The celebration afterward was larger, the great hall filled with nobles and dignitaries who'd come to assess the new queen. I moved through the crowd on Nathaniel's arm, accepting congratulations and deflecting barbed comments with as much grace as I could muster. Caroline had made the journey for the ceremony, and seeing her familiar face in the sea of strangers made me tear up. "Look at you," she said, pulling me into a tight embrace. "An actual queen. I can barely believe it. Neither can I most days. But you're happy?" She pulled back to study my face. "Truly happy?" I looked across the hall to where Nathaniel stood with Gabriel and Isaiah, his eyes finding mine even in the crowded room. The smile he gave me was private, warm, meant only for me. "Truly happy," I confirmed. The months that followed weren't easy. There were battles with the council over my proposed reforms, social snubs from nobles who thought I'd risen above my station, endless lessons in protocol and politics. But there were victories too. I established the kingdom's first formal medical training program, creating opportunities for talented healers regardless of their social class. Rebecca from my old village became one of the first students, bringing her rural knowledge to combine with city techniques. I convinced Nathaniel to fund clean water initiatives in the poorer districts, dramatically reducing disease outbreaks. I mediated disputes between packs, using my understanding of pack dynamics and my position as queen to find solutions that had eluded the all-male council. And slowly, grudgingly, even my harshest critics began to acknowledge that perhaps, just perhaps, the old spinster from the mountain pack had something to offer after all. Lord Pemberton approached me 6 months after the mating ceremony, his expression uncomfortable. "Your Majesty," he said stiffly. "I wanted to. That is, I feel I should." He sighed. "The medical reforms you implemented have reduced the Treasury's healthcare expenditures by nearly 30% while improving outcomes. It's impressive work." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd get from him. I accepted it graciously. "Thank you, Lord Pemberton. I'm glad to be of service." 1 year after I'd stood invisible at the edge of a gathering, certain I would die alone and overlooked, I stood on the castle balcony watching the sunset paint the capital in shades of gold and crimson. Nathaniel's arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. Deliriously. I leaned back against him, though I never imagined my life would look like this. Neither did I. But I'm grateful every day that I decided to attend that gathering, that I looked up and saw you. He pressed a kiss to my temple. "The council wants to throw you a grand celebration for your 1-year anniversary as queen. Do I have to?" "Technically, yes, but I'll make it as painless as possible." He paused. "Isaiah told me something interesting today. There's a young woman in the eastern provinces. Brilliant healer. completely overlooked because she's nearing 30 and unmarried. He thought you might want to recruit her for your training program." I smiled. Of course he'd noticed. Of course he'd thought of me, set up a meeting. I'd like to talk to her, because I understood now. My purpose wasn't just to be queen, wasn't just to be Nathaniel's mate. It was to use my position to see the invisible people, to value those the world had overlooked, to make sure that other women like me didn't spend decades believing they had nothing to offer. "I love you," Nathaniel murmured against my hair. "I love you too." The sun set completely, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the castle, servants were lighting lamps, preparing the evening meal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities. But tonight, I was simply Emma, the woman who'd been too old for any man, until a king had looked at her and seen perfection. The woman who'd been invisible until someone had truly seen her. And that was more than enough.